The 2018 Subaru Crosstrek. Built in a zero landfill plant, so you can roam the earth with a lighter footprint. Subaru, proud sponsor of Growing a Greener World.
I'm Joe Lample. When I created Growing a Greener World, I had one goal: to tell stories of everyday people, innovators, entrepreneurs, forward-thinking leaders who are all, in ways both big and small, dedicated to organic gardening and farming, lightening our footprint, conserving vital resources, protecting natural habitats, making a tangible difference for us all. They're real, they're passionate, they're all around us. They're the game changers who are literally growing a greener world and inspiring the rest of us to do the same. Growing a Greener World, it's more than a movement, it's our mission. Public parks play an important role in our society, a place where recreation, relaxation, and natural beauty can be enjoyed by all. But some parks are much more important to their communities than just a kid's playground or jogging path or dog walk or a place to have a picnic. Today, we're in one of the most unique public parks you'll ever see. It's all of those things, but it's a lot more too. It's a step back in time. It's a plant lover's paradise. It's a lush oasis in a modern city, a draw for locals and tourists alike, where history and nature intermingle at every turn. And all of this wonder, sometimes called Atlanta's Secret Garden, is in a setting you might never expect. A cemetery. Set aside cliches about spooky graveyards and monotonous rows of headstones with plastic bouquets of fake flowers. Oakland Cemetery is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, the 48-acre final resting place for over 70,000 people, including notable Atlantans like Gone with the Wind author Margaret Mitchell, who mentioned Oakland by name in the pages of her novel, and golfing legend Bobby Jones. 27 former Atlanta mayors and 6 Georgia governors are buried here, along with 5 generals and almost 7,000 Confederate soldiers from the Civil War. Oakland is not only a key piece of this city's history, but also offers fascinating insight into the chronology of American gardening and landscape design.
In about 1850, Atlanta was a brand new city, pretty much. And so there were about 2,600 citizens who lived here. And so the city fathers and city mothers, I assume, decided that they needed to acquire property to bury the dead of this growing metropolis. I mean, heretofore, people were buried in churchyards and behind their houses. And so we had to have an official burial spot. When the cemetery was created, it was created on a grid, as I said, just to bury the dead of a growing metropolis. But over time, something called the Rural Garden Cemetery movement began to take hold in this country from Europe. Churchyards were filling up. It became unsanitary in the middle of town to have cemeteries. And so under Queen Victoria, the ideal of a pastoral garden cemetery arose, and large tracts of land were secured to create these garden-like spots where people would want to come back and tend to the graves of their ancestors and, oh, by the way, walk their dog, stroll their child, picnic, do all the things that you do in a public park. And so Oakland became really a unique, very southern reflection of the rural garden cemetery movement. And it is reflective of not only our history, but that wonderful ideal that the Victorians had. I think they got it right when they took the notion of a scary graveyard out of the equation and created cemeteries, a Greek word for sleeping place, a more hopeful place, a place where you can come and tend to the graves, as I said, tend to the graves of your ancestors, but also celebrate life and what's to come.
This new rural garden cemetery aesthetic featured series of terraced walls with walkways and parterres clearly delineating the grounds into neat and orderly raised beds that encouraged gardening. Oakland and other cemeteries around the country became the first American parks where families would come spend an entire afternoon. And they would often treat their familial burial plots the way we might think of community gardens. The cemetery became a place to plant treasured family specimens, flowers and shrubs from a loved one's neighborhood, even exotic showpieces from far away. The gardens would be tended to often and added onto over time with an incredible variety of colors and textures, all packed tightly together. And they eventually became elaborate landscapes in miniature.
And we have photographs of some very ornate lots. We have one that has a fountain on it. We have others that are, of course, very simple, we will say. And so it varied just as families varied, or as a neighborhood might vary. But pretty much everyone did come to the cemetery on a fairly regular basis to visit the family graves, and in particular to tell the stories to the children, so they would identify with who these people were and know who their great-grandfather was, or in many cases even who their mother was. All of this changed with the onset of World War I. Obviously things changed. This was also the time of the Industrial Revolution, when things like lawnmowers were coming into fashion. And so instead of coming to the cemetery with a swing blade to cut your grass, you had someone come with a lawnmower. But by World War II, things had definitely changed dramatically. By then, cemeteries were becoming perpetual care, they were becoming seas of grass, and people no longer came the way they had. There were many public parks by then, and there were just so many more opportunities, and life was so much busier. Also, the traditions had simply changed, and people just didn't come to the cemetery except on Memorial Days. They would come on birthdays, Easter, Christmas, whatever was important to them.
Over time, the cemetery gradually fell further and further into overgrowth and disrepair. By the early 70s, Oakland had become a shell of its former self.
This place was a deteriorating, weedy mess. But every great city has a great cemetery, and Oakland is Atlanta's great cemetery. Benjamin Franklin said, "Show me your cemeteries and I'll tell you what kind of people you have." And I don't think he was talking about the people that are buried here. He was talking about the people that lived within the community. And a cemetery that's cared for, restored, that is shared, is reflective of a community that cares.
A community that cares did assemble, and the historic Oakland Foundation was born, taking on the mission of restoring and maintaining the historic site. But they quickly realized that for Oakland to truly thrive once again, it would take more than just someone to mow the grass.
We said, how can we raise money to support this place? How can we get the community engaged in using it, learning from it, enjoying it as it was conceived 160 years ago? And so they got together and said, well, let's have a Sunday in the park picnic, invite the community in, we'll make some pimento cheese sandwiches and serve lemonade, and they did. So that was our first event. It was called Sunday in the Park and took place on the first Sunday in October. The community came in and kids rode their bikes, and we spread blankets out and had picnic baskets and ate sandwiches and shared stories and talked about the folks that were here, enjoyed the beautiful art and architecture. And then we realized as more and more people began to attend that kind of event, that we were onto something. People wanted to come here and engage with this space.
Oakland's annual calendar is now loaded with opportunities for visitors to come support the Foundation's efforts by exploring the grounds, but not surprisingly, for a historic cemetery, there's one event that always stands out.
Well, our most well-known and loved event is our Halloween tour.
Yeah.
And we do that, it's up to now, I think it's 8 nights in late October. But we have people come in, it's ticketed, and they come in at different shifts, and we have both professional and amateur actors at the different stations telling the stories of what we call our residents. It's not a scary thing, no one jumps out from behind anything at you. It really is historic and respectful, but at the same time, everybody adores it. We have people that come from the West Coast every year because we change the characters every year.
Very smart.
With 48 acres, we have lots of characters.
Yes, you do. But it's not just Halloween. Oakland Cemetery is a year-round destination too, with fun events for all ages and interest. There's a massively popular plant sale twice a year, with many plants having been cultivated from cuttings right on site. Historic educational tours, family scavenger hunts, photography workshops, food, samplings and beer tastings, a 5K road race called Run Like Hell, even the all-day live music festival, Tunes from the Tombs.
If you think about what this space was designed for, again, going back to the Victorian ideal of using cemeteries as public spaces to gather and enjoy each other's company, there was music. As one TV station said, "This is disrespectful, you're dancing on graves." Well, we're not dancing on graves, and we're not disrespectful. And to give you an example of how accepting the community was for an event such as this, a TV station did come out and they said just that to me. They said, "This is disrespectful. And by the way, we're going to talk to Maynard Jackson's widow, Valerie." Mr. Jackson was the mayor of Atlanta here. We have 27 mayors. He is one of our residents. His widow, Valerie, is on our board. And so he was going to interview her about this shameful activity of having music here, dancing on Maynard's grave. So on the TV, Valerie was interviewed, and Valerie said, "This is great. Maynard loved a party." And so that dispelled any of the concern over whether we're being respectful or not. We are being respectful, and a way to make a place like Oakland safe, attractive, and preserved is to use it.
But it's the jaw-dropping displays of plants that keep most people coming back to Oakland. Sarah Henderson is the director of gardens. Well, Sarah, walking through here is nothing less than spectacular, and I really have to remind myself that we are in a cemetery, and it's only when I see these tombstones and markers that I remember that, because otherwise it is so full and lush with plants. When this garden, see, there I go.
That's
when this
fine.
cemetery
We are
was,
a garden.
I know, but when this cemetery was established, was the intent to have this many plants in here then? Or, I mean, how did we get to this point with such a lush, diverse plant palette?
Well, you said when it was established, and yes, there probably would have been an idea that this was going to happen.
Okay.
Because that was part of the rural garden cemetery aesthetic. But over time, styles changed, and we went to mown grass, and that was all there was.
But the ongoing restoration efforts have helped transform Oakland back into the Victorian-style showcase it started out as.
When we restore an area, there is a budget for landscaping. It does not include enough to do this sort of thing.
Never does.
No, I mean, that's just gardening. But, so we use that for the basics.
Yeah.
And whatever else we can. But also, we have everyone from community people who'll bring us something, to nurseries that'll support us, to landscapers who will dig something from a client's garden that they would otherwise throw away because it's old-fashioned and the people don't want it anymore. And they'd call and say, "Sarah, would you like this?" And the answer is always yes.
Always yes. There's always room for another plant.
Of course.
And it takes a team of hard-working staff as well as dedicated volunteers to not only revive, but then maintain the 40-acre landscape. Our own Erica Glazner caught up with one of the veteran gardeners who make Oakland come alive every day.
Having raised beds is a great way to bring the plants up to eye level where you can really appreciate them and get up close and personal. That's what I like. You can get right up here and smell the roses.
We always talk about, the joke is that our garden has great bones because a hardscape is really beefy. We have these walls, pathways, headstones, sculpture. It's a lot of great stuff to plant around. So brings everything up to eye level, makes it intimate, and we can garden right at eye level in a lot of situations. These walls were initially installed for practical reasons to stop erosion in other parts of the cemetery, but right, it caught on aesthetically and became a bit of a trend, and each family would pay to have walls installed around their family plot, and so before long, whole areas had walls, raised walls, which gave us a really unique
Perspective.
Exactly.
Beautiful mature trees, the shrubs layer, the ground cover layer. It really, all the components of a good design.
The landscape is really, I say, the icing on the cake. I mean, you want to see and read the tombstones, you want to see the art and architecture, but the reason people, I think, come and really enjoy it is the beauty, the gardens, the trees.
It's been a painstaking labor of love, but it almost came to an abrupt end just as the cemetery's restoration efforts had really gotten underway. In March of 2008, over one 24-hour period, an outbreak of 45 confirmed tornadoes ripped across the southeast. One of the strongest tore through downtown Atlanta, and at the twister's most destructive moment, it was directly on top of Oakland Cemetery.
It was just devastation. There were areas that had been untouched, and there were other areas that huge, magnificent trees were laid flat everywhere, knocking beautiful monuments over and everything else in their wake.
Here we lost 95 plus mature trees in 45 seconds, and we had to take another 10 down over the course of the year. So we had a lot to do before we could get back to the gardening. But by that time, we were already committed to what we were going to do, and we had a little team and a driving force, and so it just sort of almost encouraged us more than anything. I think it was a mixed blessing in a way.
And by the time everything was cleared and the grounds were beginning to recover, I was amazed at how many nurseries and nurserymen, this other nursery association, and many of the individual nurseries donated wonderful trees to us. Surprisingly, about 98% of them survived. I think those trees knew we needed them. This is one of them. It was just a young tree when we put it in '08, and now it's starting to really take some presence and to belong here.
It is. It all seems so settled in, and it's just those early years of establishment, and then all of a sudden it just takes off.
Right.
Great example of that. We love our trees. The bigger, the taller, the older, the more majestic they are to us. But also the more susceptible they are to damage from dangerous storms like what Oakland experienced. And all the more reason that we need to give those trees a periodic checkup every now and then, whether it's a favorite backyard climbing tree or a towering tree with a storied past. In the botanical world, the largest living specimen of any tree variety is given the designation champion tree. And the champion white oak of Salem, New Jersey can be found, coincidentally, in a graveyard. The historic Salem oak measures 103 feet tall with a 104-foot crown and is 22 feet in circumference at chest height. But it's not just the tape measure stats that makes this tree so special.
This area was founded primarily by Quakers, and it's known that John Fenwick, who was the founding Quaker here, actually made treaties with Indians underneath this tree, and that was in the 1600s.
Experts estimate the oak is between 500 and 600 years old and could see as much as another century with proper care. So to make sure this tree lives out its full legacy, it's examined by professional certified arborists.
So you could say we're sort of like a tree detective, okay? And we're a tree doctor, and we're trying to diagnose the situation and what we need to do to treat the tree. And there's been cases where a tree looks perfectly healthy from above ground, full crown, fully in leaf, and one day they fall over. The reason for that is there are fungi that attack the base of the tree, rot, they cause rot and decay. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't always know that the fungus is there because it's inside the tree, okay? But what we do see on the outside are the fruiting bodies, mushrooms and conchs and things of that nature. And that's where the spores are created so the fungus can reproduce itself. So when you see fruiting bodies of fungus, then you know for sure there is a fungus involved inside the tree. I think for the homeowner, it's very worthwhile to hire a certified arborist to come and inspect your property, even if it's just one time, because they're gonna be able to find those defects that could be very serious. Your house could be a target, your pool, your shed, your car, your neighbor's house, wires. Those are all issues if a tree comes down. We're about trying to take care of your trees and preserve them so that you can enjoy them for the rest of your life.
Preserving a beautiful piece of history for the next generation. It's happening in New Jersey with the Salem White Oak, and it continues in Atlanta at Oakland Cemetery.
There's no replacing anything out here. All the things that are here are really local and national treasures from an art and architectural standpoint to the standpoint of the grave sites and the people that are there and who they were and what history they reflect. I mean, these are the people who paved the paths upon which we walk today.
What a lot of people don't realize is we are an active cemetery. We are a historic site with wonderful art, architecture, history, but we're also a City of Atlanta park. And so we are open to the residents and we want them to come and enjoy and let their children run and pick a flower and have a wonderful time while they're here.
I hear from people every day that say they've lived in Atlanta for 20 years and have never been here, all the time. And it is kind of amazing that people don't get in here, and when they do, they come every day. It's a really addictive place.
But again, we have 70,000 people here. They all have stories. They're all important to us. There's one story of a little boy. His name was Brian Sanford. He was here with his family from England in the 1970s. His father worked for the Coca-Cola company. Brian fell from a window and died. And the sexton at the time found him a gravesite near the trains because he loved trains. After a few years, the family's stint with Coke was up and they were getting ready to move back to England. And we said, can we make preparations to have Brian go with you? And they said, no, we're going to leave him here. Why? And they said, because he's in good hands. So we like to feel that what we do here in the way of preserving and restoring and engaging folks with the history that exists here, that we are, our 70,000 residents are in good hands, including Brian.
Well, I hope that as of today, you were as pleasantly surprised as I was the first time I came to visit Oakland Cemetery. And perhaps part of the allure is all the mystery within the walls that surrounds this place. The horticulture, the architecture, the structure and layers and beauty, and so much more. And when you talk to people that frequently visit this place, there's a term they often use to describe it, and that is heaven on earth. And I couldn't agree more. And if you'd like to learn more or watch this episode again, you can do that on our website under the show notes for this episode. And the website address, it's the same as our show name. It's growingagreenerworld.com. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Joe Lample, and we'll see you back here next time for more Growing a Greener World.